This is speed test number 2, and it's pretty curious because we are getting great 5G signal on both of our Verizon phones. That means that the Nomad Air router will be pulling a 5G signal on the C-band, and our MoFi router is going to be pulling multiple signals of LTE, so because it's not a 5G router. Are you excited about that, honey?
You may as well be speaking Chinese because I have no clue what you're talking about.
Chinese it is. I've moved out of my tech corner in order to do these tests. They're going to be right here on this TV tray because it's next to a window right here. And I'm going to be hardwiring directly from the modem to the computer in order to get the best possible speed from here to there. The question is, can we do our work and can we stream movies? The Inseego FX2000E3 is a very capable router. It has 2 SIM card inputs. This router does not provide load balancing, but you can use 2 different carrier SIM cards to allow for a fail-safe option. It also has external antenna outputs, allowing you to boost your signal in rural areas. The MoFi 5500 GXE LTE-EM7690. The full model number is important. Between the MoFi 5500 routers, this is the best in my humble opinion. This router is not a 5G router, but it can combine 5 LTE bands to provide incredibly fast service. It provides a WAN input and offers load balancing as well as fail-safe options. The speeds will be determined by how many towers and how many LTE bands it can pull in any given area. This router also has external antenna outputs for signal boost. We are testing both the Inseego router and the MoFi router on the Verizon network. Starlink RV. This service is getting better and better as time goes on. Just 6 months ago, there is no way one could pull such a strong signal through trees. In such a case, there is still going to be obstruction signal losses, but the bursts of high-speed data allows for seamless streaming capability because the high data bursts far outweigh signal loss due to obstruction. There was no 5G available here at our first stop in North Florida, but as you can see, the FX2000 is able to pull a good enough signal to stream video. The MoFi router is pulling even faster signal than the FX2000 at this stop. Even through the trees, the Starlink is getting better service than both routers. Astounding. On our second stop along the border of Florida and Alabama, we were getting 5G signal. As you can see, there is virtually no difference between the FX2000 and our coveted MoFi router, even though one is pulling 5G and the other is combining multiple 4G bands. Starlink is still keeping pace, even with tree obstruction. On our third stop in Mississippi, we were getting 5G as well. The FX2000 is pulling a great signal on Verizon's C-band. However, the MoFi router edges out the FX2000 here. Clearly, there are several towers in the area putting out multiple 4G bands. Starlink has been getting more and more consistent with signal speed and continues to reign as the best possible internet service we can get as we travel in our RV. The fourth stop in Louisiana. Not only did we partake in some lovely Cajun cooking, but we stayed at a great KOA on a lake where we were getting fairly weak 4G signal on our phones. The FX2000 was able to launch onto a decent signal though. It did edge out the MoFi router at this stop. Again, Starlink had to grab signal through trees, and it surely did. I'm literally amazed at how well Starlink has been performing as of recent. In conclusion, any of these services would have allowed us to stream movies and work along the way. The MoFi router is far more advanced when it comes to internal settings, firewall, load balancing, port configuration, and so on. The FX2000 is a very good router. It will suffice for most people, but it does not offer me the advanced options I like to see. In any case, one can take either of these routers to a company like Rural 4G and get very good internet service. Let's talk a bit more about that with our friend Robbie Loud. I'd like to thank Robbie Loud for joining us in this conversation. Robbie, you reached out to me, I guess what been about 3 weeks ago when Nomad was having its meltdown, and you're from a company called Rural 4G, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, tell us a little bit about this company first, and then we can get on with the interview.
All right. Well, Rural 4G has been around for about 4 years. We bought the company about 2 years ago, providing internet in rural areas or other challenged areas, and for customers who may need a different type of access for different reasons. And the company is owned by a company called International, which has been around since 2017. Started with the basis of actually trying to change technology in that doing something really good with it. So we brought around a group of industry veterans that said, let's build something and try to fix a problem as opposed to just creating another toy. So we created the Internet Backpack, as it's been trademarked and called, and that we used that in 6 out of 7 continents. And it was primarily used for emergency communications when other things are breaking down. That way, rescue teams and so on can always communicate. And in many cases, we've used it in Central and South America to help small schools that are in remote areas, and even telemedicine down in Chile. So that's kind of the short and sweet of who we are.
That's pretty neat. So I guess helping doctors, humanitarian stuff, all that's pretty neat. It's a great technology, really. And what we're talking about, if people aren't familiar, we're talking about the technology based on cell phone SIM cards, correct?
Right. And that is what Rural 4G does. MCON with the backpacks uses that. LoWLAN type stuff, has a fail-safe satellite. So it all came around because we wanted to do something good and actually help and make a difference. And so when the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, our international travels and sales obviously were affected. And that's how we came across Rural 4G, because we wanted to do something domestic since we couldn't travel abroad at that time. And so we tried to get involved with helping people get internet, like I said, anywhere from rural areas. And during the pandemic, there was a lot of people who needed it for education at home or remote working, or even those like yourself that just travel around the country and work from anywhere. So we wanted to make sure that they had viable options, just not things that were kind of sidestepped to fix a problem for 10 minutes.
All right, so let's get into this a little bit, because I was involved with Nomad in for a short period, and they sent me a router, wanted me to test it, and then they sent me a Verizon SIM card. And then, of course, the whole company just all kinds of turmoil. The Jaden Garza guy had to step down, or who knows what happened. I don't know a lot about what happened or why or any of I've heard a lot of rumors, and I want to address the specific things and rumors, and I think a lot of misinformation that people have about cellular SIM cards. For example,
sure.
One thing that I've heard over and over again from a lot of different YouTubers is just stay away from resellers, people who are reselling SIM cards, because it's no good. It's going to work and then it's going to cut out. So what do you have to say about that? I know that there's challenges in with using cellular data. Some things are prioritized over others and so on. But as far as resellers are concerned, it just doesn't seem right that you can't use any kind of a reseller SIM card. Can you go into that a little more in depth?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And of course, we've had a learning curve with this, not only with Rural 4G, but as well as using SIM cards all across the planet. So resellers are actually a valuable commodity because they work in a space that allows for access to products that the general consumers can't have. And so, for instance, a lot of the things I've seen on YouTube and in Reddits and those type things are people that says, well, get this plan, do this, this, and this, and it works. But, you're right, it can. You can make a SIM card that's not meant for a data-only device work. You can make a phone work. There's all kinds of ways to do that. However, the issue becomes that as time goes on, the carriers are getting much better at figuring out which ones those are. They don't track it by just one piece of information. And typically that would be the IMEI on your data device. They now can look at the traffic and all these different things. It's not just changing your IMEI or spoofing it or changing your TTL. There's lots of things that they're doing. So a lot of the resellers out there were buying legacy data plans that had been around for years that were unlimited, but not meant for data. It was meant for phones that were low usage. And so those plans are now being sunset. So you're seeing that. You're seeing a lot of people use prepaid cards, which are fine, but when it's meant for a phone, the data only option does not work for an extended period. So there's been a number of those over the last year that we've seen, and we've actually had some of our lines from when we bought the company that happened to. January of 21 or 22, I got a call that we had a large number of lines going down. And it was because those were with the provider that had done that unbeknownst to us when we bought the company. So instead of throwing that at you, the consumer, and saying, well, you're screwed, we sucked it up and we bought new routers, modems for every single customer, shipped out. It was an expensive ordeal, but we felt it wasn't their fault. So it was up to us to make right. So, resellers have, like I said, a definitive place. Anybody can go to T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T and get a prepaid card. But generally those are phone prepaid cards. And sometimes they can be cheaper. So I'm not even going to argue that. It's a different service and it depends what level of management or expertise you have. And so, like I said, the majority of our customers, for instance, are folks who need full-time internet, whether it be at their homes, their businesses, if they're in remote areas, folks in RVs, people that just travel a lot, any of those type things. So we try to make sure that we match up the appropriate type plan, whether it be a short-term fix or a need that they have versus a long-term. And even in that, there's so many different types of plans available, meaning what you and I, if we go into a store, have access to is much different than what we as a reseller have access to. And so while sometimes you can go get your own and it works for a bit, there are things that we're able to do in the relationships we have that allow us to provide consistent online service, meaning it's not something you're going to get, it's going to go down and we're going to have to ship you new stuff all the time. It does happen from time to time, unfortunately. The cellular carrier networks are just finicky at times, especially when they change things. But as a rule, I'd say resellers have a great place if you want to be able to deal with one thing, especially if you're not a technical person, you want to know it's going to work and you want to know exactly what you're going to get. So one of the other points you talked about was some of the difficulties, and one of the things I've seen out there quite a bit in this industry that really bothers me is people saying truly unlimited, no throttling, nothing. And I'm going to be very blunt. That does not exist in this space. There are plans that have data allotments. And so if it's a quote unquote unlimited plan, which is what several folks, ourselves included, have with Verizon and some of the different services, it's unlimited data, but after say 300 gigs, they drop you down a notch in speed. So they're not saying you can't use it. They just may change you from a true 5G connection that can pull say 200 megabits if you're in that area down to a lower level. Or the thing that's more common is the network priority. They'll switch the prioritization of your card down to a lower after certain thresholds. Now, there are plans out there that allow you to always have the top priority in the networks and avoid that network congestion. But those do come at a severe premium, which most consumers just don't want to pay. That's more of a business grade type thing. So regardless of the carrier, ourselves included, if anybody tells you that they've got truly unlimited, no throttling, no nothing, it's just always going to be on, always top notch, they're probably selling you up a river. And I would rather warn you about that up front.
Another point that I would like to touch on is the idea that I love doing speed tests and I love testing different routers. And I do like the FX2000 that Nomad did send me. It's a great router. I also have a MoFi router that I use, and I, of course, put SIM cards in those, and that's how I get the extra internet or alternative internet. So I think and the speed testing is nice because some people have different needs than others, but I think there's this idea that people feel like, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because streaming services or things that you're doing online, they've gotten so much better and so efficient at putting out data over in little tiny small packets that some people think you need just this tremendous amount of download and upload capacity. And as time is going on, the technology is changing to the point where that is not actually true. It's nice to have a fast download, but for example, we're able to stream movies in here in our RV when we're pulling down, 20 gigs of data. So it doesn't have to be 100 or 200 gigs of data. And I think a lot of people there's a misconception about how much data you really need when you're streaming movies or doing things online.
Yeah. So there's two aspects there that I'll touch on. One is the actual speed. So to be able to stream with no problem. 20 is probably more than enough unless you're streaming 5 TVs with 4K resolution. Then it may not be enough. But for a household of, 3 to 4 people that are going to be streaming things, 20 to 30 is actually more than enough in most cases. And so that's the bandwidth, which is, like I said, 20, 30 megabits per second. Now with your data allotment, which is the gigabytes, most households will use 300 to 400, depending how many people. So for 3 adults in my house, we use on average 400 to 450 a month. And that's all. We have no cable in our home, or everything is using streaming services. And I've got a college student, so I can't imagine how much she actually is doing. So most people could get away with 300 if they're not streaming 4 shows at the same time all night, every night. So the unlimited is great in theory, but a lot of people don't need it if they don't want to spend that extra money. So it is well worth, if you have the option, to spend a little bit of extra money on the modem up front to make sure you have the capacity, because you may have a plan that will allow you, because of the modem, to pull 100 or plus megabits. But the modem itself, if you've got a lower end one, you may only pull 20 or 30. So it's not always just the plan. Sometimes it's the hardware. And
I preach that all the time, that it's definitely the hardware, because like you said, if you're combining several frequencies at once, you're going to get a faster speed, and it's going to, you're not going to get that buffering, which is the worst when you're trying to watch something or do something, or things are moving slow. So yeah, the hardware is a crucial part of the whole operation.
Most definitely. And with folks like yourself in the RV community that are traveling around quite a bit, once you're outside of the metropolitan areas, you're often out of the 5G C-band spectrum. So even though you don't have availability, if you've got that higher end modem where you can do that, you can still get that 7,500 up to, in theory, a Cat 22 will do about 600 megabits. I've never seen it happen, but I've seen it oftentimes be anywhere from 80 to 180, which for, let's be honest, almost all of us, that's more than enough bandwidth.
Another thing that I want to touch on, and the reason you contacted me is because you had seen I had done some videos about speed testing and modems and Nomad and blah, blah, blah. And you contacted me and said, hey, look, I know you've got the Inseego router, and I can actually send you a SIM card that you can put into that router and flip to our network.
One thing that we're doing differently is the plan that we're using is that, say, a 5G capable plan, obviously reverts to LTE in an area if you're in one such as yourself. But we're doing the 200 megabit for all of those plans. We're not differentiating between 100 megabit and 200 megabit. So all somebody has to do is go to our website or give us a call. We'll ship out a new SIM card at no charge. You just pay for the first month of service. And even with that, we're going to cut it to half off the first month so people don't feel the financial pain. We just want them to know, strangely enough, there is actually a company that actually cares about keeping people online and trying to help.
Yeah, so you did send me a Verizon SIM card as well. I put it in the Inseego. I turned off the router, turned it back on, boom, it started working. And matter of fact, we are doing this interview on my end with the SIM card that you had sent me. I'm testing the Inseego router just to make sure everything, I still have my Starlink and I still have my MoFi and other options, but I want to really put this thing through the ringer to make sure it's going to do everything it should do. So that's pretty cool. We're actually on a Zoom call and everything seems to be working fine.
Well, that makes me happy. I'm a big proponent of things working. And
yeah, no kidding.
If not, it causes me heartache. But on the flip side, while we have customer service folks, I like it when they're not getting a lot of calls, because that means we're doing our job well. And so just one more thing on that. So we have live people at our customer service number 7 days a week, usually till 7 or 8 in the evening. We do have a couple evenings, somebody that takes it longer. And probably in the next month or two, we're going to 24/7 live live customer support. So if you call in, you get an actual live voice 24 hours a day.
That is really cool. I think so many companies in this day and age are moving away from that business model. And it's for old guys like me, I'm old school. I want to pick up the phone. I want to talk to somebody. I don't want to chat. I don't want to text. I don't want any of that crap. I want to get someone on the phone, and I don't want to punch this number, that go through some phone loop to get there.
The funny thing about that, and this is I why we decided to do the way we are is if your internet's down from us, how do I expect you to do an online chat or send me an email?
Right.
Your phone might be working, but if your internet's down, trying to use an internet solution to fix it doesn't always work. So we tried to make sure that we have people staffed as much as possible. So in that rare case you call after hours, somebody's usually called you back before 10 the next morning.
I wanted to just kind of review. So basically, being a reseller is not a naughty bad word in this industry. I had many retail businesses in my younger years, and every retail business is a reseller because you're getting the product from someone else and then you're marketing it up and selling it to the consumer. So yes, so resellers are fine. You just need a straightforward, trustworthy company that's going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, that's going to provide the customer service to back it up. Also, you can help people that are either involved with our channel, our friends, our customers, or just anyone in general that might be stuck with a Nomad router that is not functioning, or any other router, bring your own router type of a situation. You can actually help those folks as well. And the service works, and it can be throttled, it can be limited, but it's also an important thing for people to know how much data they're using. And I think a lot of people don't know that. They don't know how much data they're possibly using. But with a good router, you can go in and test it, and you can actually go in and look at your data usage on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and it'll tell you this is how much data you're using.
Yep. And one last comment about the throttling piece. I won't say don't hold it against a reseller. The resellers don't have control of that, other than making sure you have a plan that best suits what you need it to do. So it could cost more, cost less. The carriers are always changing those. So there are times that the resellers just don't know until you call or alert them that, hey, I'm having issues. And then they go dig and find. So it's kind of a moving target. I'm not trying to shuck responsibility. We get on top of it. But, just know that when it comes to cellular internet, there's always issues, just like your phone. Sometimes your phone has better signal than others. And it functions the same way because it's on the same network. So whatever grace, I'll use that word grace, that you give your phone's usage, that's what you need to keep in mind when using this type of data service or internet service.
Well, there's no doubt that having, and we touched on this earlier, having a router that can pull in multiple frequencies, your phone doesn't necessarily do that. I don't think it does, because I've noticed whenever we are pulling in signals on our routers, they're pulling in much faster than our phones can, and our phones are 5G capable. So that's another reason why you want to get one of those fancy dancy routers.
I would agree with that.
All right. So a couple things, actually. First of all, I was promised a mohawk. I don't see a mohawk.
I forgot it. I did forget it today. I'm so sorry. So as you can see, the hairs actually does exist. And I'll shoot you a picture with the mohawk so you can include it. But I wore it this weekend and it measured a good 7 and 7.5 inches.
Nice. And then finally, I heard a rumor that you actually have a general that works with your company. And that to me is extremely interesting. Tell me a little bit more about the general.
We do. We have a retired 2-star general from the Air Force, retired Major General Dale Myros. He was the first CIO of the American military, so to speak, back in the 90s. When we went to the Middle East in the 90s, he's the one that basically helped build our network infrastructure there. He's worked at NORAD. He's worked with several presidents. Fantastic man, but a brilliant man in this industry, in this space as well. So that's one of the things I can say is because we have him as the chairman of the board, we have to operate within a certain box to make sure we do things the right way, because I can't put him at risk. So
no, you don't know. You don't want to sully the reputation of a 2-star general.
No, and you don't want the American military coming off after you because you've upset the general. So
right. Well, hopefully one day we can actually have an interview with the general. I just think it would be fun to talk to someone like that. The stories he must have have got to be awesome.
They are fantastic. Obviously I don't hear everything because I think once you're at that level, you're never actually out. But, he has great stories about different things. Phenomenal human being. And on top of that, like I said, he's brilliant when it comes to this space because he's had to operate networks and connectivity all across the planet, emergency situations, consistent situations. So not only is He great in that position as a chairman. He actually has the knowledge, the operating knowledge of what we do to back that up. So
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be in touch here shortly.
I will do that. And you have a great day, my friend.
You have a great day too.